Okay, we will start. Shalom and bracha, everyone. Welcome back. Hope everyone had an amazing Pesach, an amazing Zman Cheirseinu. We're entering now Rosh Chodesh Iyar. A good Chodesh. By the Chassidim, they used to say the word Iyar, the abbreviation, the Rashi Tevis of Iyar, the Aleph is Ani, the two Yuds is Hashem, and the Reish is Reifecha. It says from the Mekubalim that the month of Iyar, the rain in Iyar, is Mesugal for Refuah. The month of Iyar has a certain Sgula for Refuah. So the name Iyar is Ani Hashem Reifecha. Aleph Ani, Yud is Hashem Reifecha. It's a Chodesh, a month of Refuah. Now the Bnei Yisoscha, the way he puts it, he says, obviously there is a physical Refuah that we have in this month, but also in the days of Sfira So'ima, counting the Sfira, getting closer and closer to the days of Matan Torah, when we connect to the days of Sfira So'ima, it elevates us and it brings our neshama to a higher level, which is the refuah for the neshama. Now that we went out of the Yom Tov from Pesach, says the Bnei Yisoscha, where we ate the matzah, which matzah, according to the Zohar, is michle da asvisa. It's food, healing food. So we're entering now into a month, taking, so to say, the 7 days that we had the medicine, which is the matzahs, which is healing both physically, but obviously even more spiritually. We're taking it now into this coming month, in the month of Iyar, which is Ani Hashem Reifecha. The Chidah, the Heilige Chidah, he says, why is it during the time of Sfira that we read the Parshas of Shmini, Tazria, Metzora, Achremos Kedoshim, Emor? Why is it that these weeks we read the Parshas of all these different Parshas? Says the Chidah, because these Parshas, Shmini has the Parshas of Macholim, eating kosher food, to eat things that are appropriate, and Chas v'Sholom not to eat things that are inappropriate. Tazria Metzora deals with Lashon Hara, with Teras, that comes because of Lashon Hara, of speaking Chas v'Sholom bad, not speaking the way we should speak. It has to, and then Achremos Kedoshim has to do with purification, with Tumah, with the higher of purity. Kedoshim is Kadosh, to be Heilig. Emor is the Kedusha of the Kahanim, the purification of the Kahanim. Everything, says the Chidah, all these Parshas has to do with Kedusha, with elevating ourselves, elevating our neshama, elevating ourselves closer to the way we Yidden should be, to behave in a Kedushadik way, in a Heilige way. Shemini, which has to do with the food, says the Kedushas Levi, the Torah teaches us that we have to be careful of two different aspects of our mouth. In last week's Parsha, in Parsha Shmini, the Torah teaches us that we have to be careful what gets into our mouth, what food we eat, how we eat, what we eat. And then in this week's Parsha, is Tazria and Metzora, the Torah talks of the things that come out of our mouth, the words that we speak. These two things go together, says the Kedushas Levi. A person, to be able to have a pure mouth, we need both. We need to have this zehirus, to be careful on what gets into our mouth, In the same time, we have to be careful what we say with our mouth. And usually, says the Kedushas Levi, if a person chas v'sholem eats nevelis etrefes, he eats food that's not appropriate, that a yid shouldn't eat, unfortunately, then what comes out from his mouth is also not pure. Speaking in pureness, what we say, how we say, what we talk about other people, we keep our mouth more mezuchach, more pure, through eating mezuchach food, through eating foods which is obviously kosher and it's b'kedusha. The Kedushas Levi says last week a very interesting thing. It's a very famous thing, but it's a very interesting thing. He says one of the very important thing, going back to Moshe, one of the reasons why Moshe Rabbeinu did not nurse when Basia went around to find someone to nurse Moshe Rabbeinu after finding Moshe Rabbeinu in the Nilus. The reason why he didn't nurse, says the Medrash, because a mouth, which eventually would be speaking to the Rebbeinu Shalom, Hashem would be speaking to him, and he'll speak to that Rebbeinu Shalom. This mouth has to be very careful what he eats. So Moshe Rabbeinu had to have a peh kodosh, a heilige mouth, not to take into his mouth nursing from non-Jewish ladies. So says the Kedushas Levi, every single Yid, he quotes a Medrash, when Mashiach comes, would be zoiche that the Shechina, the Rebbeinu Shalom, would speak with us. So he says, we have to be very careful in Golus, during the time of exile, which we are davening every single day to be zoiche to Mashiach Tzidkenu, that we should have our mouth to be pure, that we should only bring into our mouth food, drinks, which is obviously the way on the standards of a Yiddish food. And now this week we're talking about the inyan of Lashon Hara. Says the Chidah. The Chidah says some powerful thing. He says like this. He says, during the time of Sfira, we see that the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva were not noyek kovod zeh b'zeh. There was a lack of respect to one another. And since there was a lack of respect to one another, we all know what Chazal teach us, that unfortunately 24,000 Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva passed away during the time of Sfira. Says the Chidah, why is it that during this time of the year they passed away? Says the Chidah, you know why? Because these weeks are crucial, are so important for us to work in our midos. We learn Pirkei Avos. We focus on the midos, counting the spheres, which has to do with the midos, with the behaviors, the different things, in a simplistic way and in a deeper Kabbalistic way, but everything has to do with the behavior, with the way we behave, both to one another and obviously to Hashem. So these are days, says the Chidah, which it's time, that's what he says, time of judgment, the way one person behaves to another person. In Shemayim, it's a time when Hashem is more medagdik. The way he sees things in these days are in a more severe way than in the whole year, ben Adam l'chaveiroi, how we behave with one another. Therefore, says the Chidah, these days, these weeks, the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva passed away. The Parshios, says the Chidah, are also connected to this same idea. For sure, Tazria, Metzora, these two Parshas are so focused on inyonim of Lashon Hara, of ben Adam l'chaveiroi, how we talk, what we talk, which has to do ben Adam l'chaveiroi, all because these weeks are very crucial with a ben Adam l'chaveiroi aspect, that we have to be more sensitive to one another. Interestingly, says the Chidah, if we go through the Memches Devarim Sha'atoyre Niknes Behem, in Mishnayis Avos, the 48 different things that a person has to have in order to be able to be a real ben Torah, sha'Torah niknas behem. He should really have a kinyan. He should acquire the Torah. He says the 32nd, the Lamed Beis of the Memches of the 48 different things which the Mishnah goes through, the list that the Mishnah goes through, the 32nd one is Oyev Asabrios. He says when it comes Lamed Beis Ba'omer, the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva, when it's Oyer, it awakened, it came down at Oyev Asabrios, this feeling of Oyev Asabrios, loving one another, and that's when the Misa, when they stop dying. Lamed Beis Ba'omer, he says, has to do with the 32nd, with the Lamed Beis of the Kinyan HaTorah, which is Oyev Asabrios, loving one another, which is basically one of the fundamental Yesoides when it comes to Matan Torah, to Kabbalas HaTorah. And this is now the time, during the time of Svira, when we learn the Parshios that has to do with Tazria, Metzora, how we talk, what we talk, which is basically focusing on being sensitive to one another. For sure, when a person opens up the Sifrei Chavetz Chaim, and we see there are so many different halachas that the Chavetz Chaim teaches us, what we could say, what we can't say, sometimes we could feel very overwhelmed. Not to talk Lashon Hara sometimes could be very overwhelming. And when I say overwhelming, sometimes we're all human, and we know Kulam ba'avak Lashon Hara. Everyone has avak Lashon Hara. This is something that people fall through, everyone. We're all human, and we say things which sometimes it's in a disrespectful way for someone else. We're human. We're sometimes upset about someone. So we have to appreciate a Gemara Masechta Shabbos for us to understand and appreciate that every move that we do in a positive way has an amazing koyach. And chas v'sholom, we should never say to ourselves, I anyhow spoke Lashon Hara today, so I might as well speak more Lashon Hara, chas v'sholom. Sometimes the Yetzer Hara puts in these type of thoughts into our brain when we chas v'sholom, we're nichshel, we stumble and we do speak Lashon Hara, and chas v'sholom, the Yetzer Hara could get us and suck us in to chas v'sholom, get into speaking even more. So there's a famous Gemara. The Gemara says a story about Nasan Tzitzitza, the Gemara says. This person Nasan, he was a big Baal Aveirus of the Gemara. He mamish was over in all the Aveirus Torah. He did all the Aveirus in the Torah. Says the Gemara, Yom Echad, one day, he was on the way to do a terrible Aveira, and something got him that he kept himself back, and he didn't do this Aveira. He controlled himself. He overpowered the Yetzer Hara, and he controlled himself. He didn't do the Aveira. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Akiva was walking with his Talmidim on the other side of the street, and he saw from afar this Nasan. As he looked at him, says the Gemara, he saw a very powerful light, or a light was shining on his forehead. And he turned to his Talmidim, who is this? He didn't know who that was. He said, who is this person that I see a light shining? He has a or shining from his forehead. And the Talmidim said, Rebbe, you don't know who this is? This is Nasan. Nasan the Baal Aveira. Rabbi Akiva asked his Talmidim, are you able to see this light? And the Talmidim said no. So Rabbi Akiva said, if from Shemayim they gave me this opportunity to see the light on Nasan, for sure there's something that I need to do with this Nasan. Rabbi Akiva, says the Gemara, went over to the Nasan and he says, Nasan, I see an amazing light on you. I would be willing to learn with you Torah. Are you willing to learn Torah? And Nasan said, no problem, let me try. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Akiva sat down with his Nasan and he started teaching with him Torah. And it didn't take long, said the Gemara, till he was able to be koine to acquire the entire Torah. To the level that he became a Tana, a heilige Tana, the Tana which the Gemara is known as Nosan Tzitzisa. So the heilige Svarim point out this Gemara to give us chizuk. So many times we feel overwhelmed when it comes to certain mitzvahs. We feel that it's too much. And be'emes, if the Gemara says kulam ba'avak Lashon Hara, it is overwhelming. But the idea is, even if a person controls himself for a few moments, as we know the Heilige Gra says, every moment that a person is boilim as piv, he doesn't speak things that are dvarim betelim, it's closer to ashros ashchina, that the shchina should rest on him. So we have to appreciate that every move in the right direction has an amazing koyach, just like we see by Nosan Tzitzitza. Now, a few interesting points that we see in this week's Parshios, which is inspirational for us to appreciate the sensitivity that we need to have to one another. Now, besides the famous medrash, which everyone knows, the famous medrash of the Roichel Echad, there was a peddler, a person who went around and he sold different samimonim, different spices, different things. And he passed by Rabbi Yanai. And Rabbi Yanai says the medrash was sitting on his porch and he heard someone calling out, "Who wants samachayim? Who wants samachayim?" And Rabbi Yanai spoke up and he said, "I want samachayim. Could you sell me samachayim?" And this roichel, this peddler said, No. Rabbi Yanai, it's not for you. It's not for you. When I'm selling something, I'm selling it to not your caliber people. Rabbi Yanai says the medrash didn't want to hear what this roichel said. He said, "Yes, I do want. Please sell it to me." So after him begging him, famous medrash, this roichel opened up a Tehillim, which it says, "Mia isha chavetz chayim oyev yomim lirois toiv," a person who wants to have a good life. Nitzoyer lishoincha meira, guard your tongue from speaking bad. And Rabbi Yanai said, "Whoa, I learned this pasuk so many times, but I never understood it the way this roichel explained it to me." So the famous kasha that everyone asks, and the Dubnei Maggid asked this kasha as well. Why was Rabbi Yanai so excited with this roichel that the roichel read to him a pasuk in Tehillim, which is Samachayim, Mio Isha Chofetz Chayim Oyev Yomim Lirois Toiv, and he became so excited. What was the excitement of this when he read to him a simplistic pasuk? Says the Dubnei Maggid, a fascinating idea. He says like this. He says, most of the time, when we learn different things, we see things in the Torah, the first instinct that we have, that the Torah tells us some reward, it's l'olam haba, we'll have a reward in l'olam haba, or it's a ruchniisdiga reward, we'll be able to feel a bigger geschmack in our learning and our davening. But it doesn't occur to us as the Dubnei Maggid that there are situations that the actual taich, the simplistic taich of the pasuk relates to our day-to-day life. Says the Dubnei Maggid. Till then, Rabbi Yanai, when he saw the pasuk, Mi o isha chafetz chayim oyev yomim lirois toiv, he thought, you know what yomim means? Yomim is olam haba yomim. It's yomim of being able to finish Shas and learn Dalet Chelke Shulchan Aruch. But to have a geschmacke life day to day, husband and wife living in a geschmacke harmonious life and having nachas from the kinderlach and just enjoying life in a simplistic way, Rabbi Yanai did not appreciate that. Meaning this is not the way he saw the pasuk. Came the roichel, and the roichel said, you know what? I sell spices. I sell medicines. Why am I doing this? I'm doing this for the physical body. Said this roichel, I have this Sefer Tehillim, which has a pasuk, which has all the ingredients for a healthy simcha gishmaka life. And you don't, most of the time, will not need all these different medicines. If you are Metzora l'shoincha meiros v'secha medaber mirma, if you keep yourself back from speaking bad about people, Lashon Hara, if you see life in a positive way instead of a negative way, not being upset on the whole world, being happy, being grateful, and being positive, it will help you actually in a physical way. Says Rabbi Yanai, whoa, so many years that I'm learning this pasuk, and I always focused on the deeper understanding. I lost the actual simplistic understanding, which I didn't chap. This Roichel, he gave me to appreciate the simplistic day-to-day life. We have a better life if we are sensitive to one another. There's an amazing balaturim in this week's Parsha, which also brings out this idea of being sensitive to one another. And it actually has to do with a sensitivity to our spouses, which obviously, when we live 24/7 together, we sometimes we lose that appreciation, that sensitivity of appreciating one another in a positive, in a geschmacka, in a very simchadige way. In the beginning of the Parsha, when the Torah talks about the halachis of a lady giving birth, of a mommy giving birth to her child, to either a girl or a boy, the Torah says, after 33 days of giving birth, there's a mitzvah of bringing a carbon, which is basically a carbon, and then the Torah says in Pasuk Vav, when the days are filled, in other words, once these days are filled, then there's a mitzvah to bring the following karbonos: a keves ben shenasoi, a lamb, for a carbon oila, uven yoina, and a young dove, or toir, or turtle dove, I don't know how to say it, I'm not sure I'm saying it the right way, but to bring these type of birds for a carbon chatos. Ask the balaturim, always in the Torah, says the balaturim, wherever the Torah mentions these two type of birds, the yoina bird and the tar bird, the Torah mentions first the toir, first the toir bird, and then the yoina bird. Why over here does the Torah say first yoina and then tar? You know why, says the Heilige Balaturim? Because the Torah really, a tar bird is really more chashuv. The Torah usually wants you, if you have a choice to bring these two type of birds, a yoina bird or a tar bird, tough reish bird, you should rather bring the tar bird because it's more chashuv. One exception over here. You know why? Says the Balaturim. Because over here, the Torah says usually you bring two yoinos or two toirim. All the other places you bring two. This is the only place that you bring only one. Now, if you bring one, usually when you bring both, says the Balaturim doesn't say it, he doesn't get into all these details, but when you bring both, you bring the couple. You bring the husband and the wife. Over here, you bring only one, so you will bring only one spouse, and the other, meaning one of the two, the husband or the wife, and the other one would be very sad, says the Balaturim. Now, a tor is, a yoino is less sad when his spouse is taken away or her spouse is taken away than a tor. A tor is more connected to the spouse. So says the Balaturim, the Torah is sensitive to a spouse, even a bird. And the Torah says, if you have a choice to take either one yoina or one tor, rather take one yoina, which the spouse would stay by itself, because it's less painful, it's less in pain than when you take away the Torah from its spouse. The spouse is in bigger pain. So, says the Baal HaTurim, you know what the Torah is teaching us? The sensitivity that we need to have to one another. And this is not, we're not talking about two human people, we're talking about two birds. If this is when we're talking about birds, how much more so do we need to be sensitive to one another, one person to another, one spouse to another? And this is the Hakdama, this is the basically the Torah is teaching this to us before the Torah starts the Parsha of Negoim, that you should appreciate one another, be sensitive to one another. There's a famous Medrash, which Rashi also quotes, which the Medrash says, we know there are different type of Negoim. There's a nega, there's a leprosy, which goes on the house of a person. Then there's a nega, there's negoyim, leprosy, that goes on the clothing of the person. And then there's negoyim that goes on the actual skin of the person. Famous Medrash, famous Chazal. First, if a person misbehaves, if a person is chas v'sholem speaking Lashon Hara, Hashem will send the nega on the house. If the person doesn't get the message and he chas v'sholem still continues speaking Lashon Hara, he goes on to his begodim on his clothing. If chas v'sholem he doesn't get the message, then it goes on the actual body himself. Says the Medrash, you know why? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not punish people right away. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, with his mercifulness, Beroiv Rachma v'chasadov, he first tries to hint to the person that the person should not chas v'sholem have a physical nega on his body. Now, the physical nega on the body, according to the Rambam, was not a comfortable thing. It was very itchy. It wasn't so comfortable. And obviously, he had to be mechutz la'machaneh. He has to be outside the camp. So it was very painful. It was a painful thing. And Hashem does not want the person to be in this pain right away. So before we saw the sensitivity that the Torah has to two birds, and now we see the sensitivity that Hashem has to us. But the Heilige Medrash Shmuel on Pirkei Avos asks a very powerful question. Now, one more thing that the Medrash says. Medrash says, Iyov, the famous Iyov that was punished, first, he didn't suffer. His body, he was healthy. At first, Hashem punished all the surroundings. His animals died, and he lost his money, he lost his parnasa, and then his body was in great pain. Same says the Medrash with Machloin el Chilyoin, the two sons of Elimelech and Naomi. Machloin and Chilyoin, the two sons of Naomi, they didn't die right away. First, it was slowly. First the surroundings, but they didn't do teshuva, and then Hashem punished them themselves. Because Hashem first punishes the surroundings before the person himself. Ask the Medrash Shmuel, wait a second. But we see Elimelech himself, the husband of Naomi, he was punished right away. It doesn't say by him that everything around him first, he lost everything. He actually was put to death right away. Why by him, the usual concept that Hashem doesn't punish the person himself, why didn't this apply to him? Listen in, Rabbi Bayer, to the Medrash Shmuel. Says the Medrash Shmuel, Hashem has mercy on us if we have mercy on other people. Yes, we sometimes speak Lashon Hara, but if we still have rachmanus on another person, we love another Yid. We make mistakes, we speak Lashon Hara, but if we love another Yid, Hashem says, since he has rachmanus, I will have of him rachmanus. He has rachmanus on another Yid, I will have rachmanus on him, and I will not give the punishment directly on his body. All said when there's still rachmanus. If a person chas v'sholem gets into a mode of lacking rachmanus, of a mode of achzorius, of chas v'sholem, of not disliking other people and being harsh to other people, that's when Hashem says, besides Lashon Hara, he doesn't have rachmanus. These rules don't apply. Go right to him. Says the Medrash Shmuel, what did Elimelech do? It was in the middle of a famine, in the middle of a hunger. People in Eretz Yisrael were starving. Elimelech was able to supply food. He was able to support the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael. He was disturbed. He didn't have menucha. He didn't have peace. He went into a mode of lack of putting his rachmanus, his mercy aside. Ooh, no rachmanus. Then Hashem Rachmanu Litzlan gets right to the person himself. As long as there is rachmanus, there are levels. Once there is no rachmanus, Hashem Yishmerenu. So we see over here an amazing thought. Going back to what I said in the beginning of this year. Yes, sometimes we speak Lashon Hara Nebuch. Rachmanul Litzlan. We are human. Still rachmanus. You still have rachmanus on another person. There's rachmanus. Hashem has rachmanus midah keneged midah. This Sunday, this Motzei Shabbos, is a very special yahrzeit. The yahrzeit of Reb Shayel Karastir. Reb Shayel Karastir, who was nifter over 100 years ago, he was the Baal Rachmim, the mercy person, the person, a Yid, a Heilige Yid, who gave so much food for tzedakah. He gave so much tzedakah. He was known with his amazing rachmanus that he had. So there are so many stories of Reb Shayela, but one of the stories, which is also obviously one of these very powerful, fascinating stories. There was once a chassid, a Karastira chassid, that came to Reb Shayela, and he said, Rebbe, I need to support my family. Parnasa is there's a lack of parnasa. I'm struggling with parnasa. And he begged his Rebbe to give him a bracha. So Reb Shayela at one point gave him a bracha, and he told him which business that he should invest in. And Baruch Hashem, he was matzliach, he had success in a very deep way, and he became very wealthy. And a while later, this chassid of Reb Shayela came to Reb Shayela and he says, Rebbe, I have no day and no night. People are begging me for tzedakah. People are mamish nagging, they're banging on my door. I don't have menucha, Rebbe. Could Rebbe help me? So Reb Shayela said, I don't like this. He said, why is it that Hashem gives someone ashiris wealth? It's only because of helping other people. For you to complain about your wealth, that other people are disturbing you, this is a serious problem, said Reb Shayela. Reb Shayela said, I don't know if I could trust you. Could be I need to take the parnasa and I got to daven to Hashem to give it to someone else. Someone which is more trustworthy than you. And the person was like, oy vey, what did I just do? And he begged Reb Shayela, please, don't take away the parnasa. I promise you I'll do my mission. And Reb Shayela said, you know what? I want to do the following. I want to make a goyrel. I'm going to put into this goyrel, to this plot, I'll put in names of a whole bunch of people that I would like them to become wealthy. And I'll pull out one name and I'll see if from Shamayim you're still worthy. If you're still worthy to be this wealthy person, your name will come out. And the Yid was sitting there and he was davening and doing teshuva on this thing that he had, that he didn't, he wasn't open to have rachmanus on other people. He did teshuva. And Reb Shaila took out this piece of paper and he opened it up. And who was it? It was this person. Reb Shaila said, now I feel calm, that from Shemayim I see openly that you are worthy, you did teshuva and you are worthy to have the money. Same idea that I said before, rachmanus. When we have rachmanus, we have mercy on other people. When our rachmanus is open, our gefühl